Trudeau, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jill.
One of my guests was just surmising that there is a rush on in this country to get our natural resources, our fossil fuels, out into the world, sell them and make our money before we see climate regulations come down in Canada that make it, absolutely impossible to sell, to keep going along the path we've been going along with fossil fuels. Is there any truth to that? Is that a possibility?
Well, I think it's certainly a theory because this government has consistently been more of a cheerleader for this project and others rather than the referee that Canadians expect to see. We have a government that has so not cared about the environmental consequences, about community consultation, about getting input and support from Aboriginal communities, that Canadians are feeling like they have to step up and push back and have the government do its job by not approving these things. And I'm really disappointed with this decision today.
Mm-hmm. You've said that northern BC is a place of pristine waters and wilderness. It's not a place for pipelines. What about the LNG project that's being pushed by the Christy Clark Liberal government here?
Well, I think the main concern that I have with pipelines, with the specific Northern Gateway proposal, is not just around the beauty and the pristineness of the place, but the thousands upon thousands of British Columbians who make their livelihood on the Pacific, the amount of the BC's coastal economy that depends on a healthy ocean, and to see this pipeline be pushed through by this government is really offside with that, and it's those concerns that we have about Northern Gateway that are top of mind right now.
What about First Nations partnerships, though, that are already in place with Christy Clark on LNG?
Well, I think that's a good example of the need to get community support, to get buy-in and engagement by First Nations. And that's something that this government has not only failed at, it's actually actively impeded the capacity to build the kinds of bonds of trust that are going to allow for the partnerships we need.
Do you think there is room then for partnerships with Aboriginal communities for Northern Gateway? Do you see that as a possibility?
Well, I think I think that Enbridge and the Harper government have completely botched the process on this, and I don't know that there's any way. Actually, I'm fairly certain that this pipeline isn't going to end up happening just because if I have the honor of becoming Prime Minister, I certainly will not let it happen. It's too clear that British Columbians have too many concerns about the impact of this pipeline on their economy, that First Nations organizations and communities are feeling too left out and used in this process. It's not the kind of approach that actually leads to a stronger economy or a stronger country.
How should Alberta get its bitumen to market then?
Well, I think a great example is in the failure of the Keystone XL pipeline so far, where the Harper government has done nothing about demonstrating a level of environmental responsibility, which has prevented the Obama administration from approving something that should have been a fairly straightforward pipeline between two friends and allies. But anytime you're talking about creating energy infrastructure projects, you have to remember that even though governments grant permits, only communities grant permission, and that's something that the Harper government has completely forgot.
This, as you know, is not a popular decision with British Columbians. Polls showing the majority of British Columbians not in favor of this project. Some groups are suggesting that they will engage in civil disobedience. Do you support opposition to this project regardless of the tactics they might use?
No, violence is never an acceptable part of political discourse in this country, and what I'm trying to demonstrate very clearly is there will be a strong alternative to Mr. Harper in the next election, and if British Columbians are upset with the 21 Conservative MPs who've become mouthpieces for Mr. Harper rather than the voices for British Columbians here in Ottawa, then they should certainly get involved, get organized, and start making sure that Mr. Harper is no longer Prime Minister after this next election.
Certainly, if you become Prime Minister, one of your issues will be creating jobs, keeping the Canadian economy rolling. You've talked about a sustainable economy in this country. There is a market for Canadian oil. So how does the Trudeau government plan on ensuring timely access to that product if you aren't in favor of a project like Northern Gateway?
Well, as you know, our economy, however much we invest in research and creativity and innovative advanced jobs, there will always be a foundational element in Canada because we're Canada for our natural resources. And one of the most important roles that a Canadian Prime Minister has always had, traditionally, goes back to railroads and grain, is to make sure that we can actually get our resources to market. And what that means now in the 21st century is not just building the physical infrastructure to get our resources to market, but getting community buy-in, getting social license for it. And that's where this government has failed. And that's where having a more positive, engaged dialogue as a government, working with provincial premiers, working with municipal leaders, respecting First Nations groups, that is going to be what allows us to unlock markets and energy infrastructure in a way that everyone can buy in. The my way or the highway approach that Mr. Harper is pushing is just not suitable for the way Canada functions.
Justin Trudeau, federal Liberal leader, we thank you for joining us this afternoon.
It's always a pleasure to connect with BC, Jill. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ben West, your thoughts on what the potential future Prime Minister had to say?
Well, I was definitely really interested to hear him say that if he becomes the Prime Minister, that he'll stop the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline. We believe that this is actually going to be a decision that the Harper government regrets making. It's one thing to try to approve something in Ottawa. It's another thing to actually try to build something in British Columbia. We know that whether it be through lawsuits or through direct action, that this is going to be very difficult to really get done anytime soon. And I'm sure it will be very much a live issue going into the next federal election.
Which is in 2015. That's not that far away.
Not that far away, and it's an unpopular government. I mean, this is a government that's been in for a while, has a number of scandals that it's carrying around, and has been seen to be undermining democracy in a number of different ways, whether it be through the Fair Election Act or through changes to the Environmental Assessment Act, or you name it.
Right, but Karen, what Justin Trudeau was just saying isn't going to be popular with Alberta.
No, I doubt it will be popular with Alberta. Nothing to do with energy policy nationally is ever popular with Alberta, except turn on the tap. He's going to have a difficulty in Alberta, I have no doubt.
So, neither of you a political pundit, but this is the question that just popped into my head. What's more valuable, BC or Alberta?
I think Trudeau, anybody with the name Trudeau is going to have a hard time in Alberta, regardless of their policies, regardless of what they put on the table. I think, most pundits that I'm listening to are saying that BC and Ontario are really the battlegrounds for this next election. I think, the pipeline issue will be a big issue in this province. What I'd really like to see from the federal Liberals personally is really a commitment around action on climate change. To oppose Enbridge is a really great first step. It definitely is symbolic of listening to the people and sort of a willingness to really talk about responsible resource development and what that looks like. No question that we will continue to use our natural resources one way or another. I think the question is, are we going to take the climate science seriously? I mean, the International Energy Agency says we need to leave about 2/3 of our reserves in the ground. Is that something that we're taking seriously? And are we really talking about how we could be creating jobs other ways? I think we're missing a lot of opportunities that are already being explored elsewhere in the world. And the question is, are we going to get left behind? Are we going to be part of the solution or part of the problem?
Well, are we already not a little bit behind?
We are way behind Europe. The thing is, international climate scientists have told us we have 15 years to get this right, to get a handle on emissions. And we have a government here that's building 30-year infrastructure for exactly the fuel that's causing the problem. It's just inexcusable that this is what passes for climate policy in this country.
Paul Jorgenson with Nature Canada joining us on the phone. Paul, thanks for joining us this afternoon. Your thoughts on the decision today?
Well, Nature Canada is frankly disappointed with the federal government's decision to approve the Northern Gateway pipeline. We had a little moment of a glimmer of hope earlier this afternoon where we thought, well, maybe, they're delaying it. But at the end of the day, Nature didn't win out today, we don't think.
No, and it's funny, you mentioned they were delaying it. It's starting to look more and more like that was not because they were, wrestling over what the answer was going to be, but simply that for political purposes, they were just kind of hoping they could push it off to the last possible moment.
This has been really bizarre to watch, hasn't it? I mean, this decision, you know, to have something of this magnitude, to not even know when the decision was happening, right up until the day the decision was made, and really what we've seen is a press release from the government.
Exactly. Paul, you are in Ottawa, so what's the buzz there about what's transpired?
Well, it's a really political town, so I can tell you that my Twitter feed has just been alight all day about this. In fact, all week about this. We were originally the scuttlebutt was originally that we were going to hear about this last week, and we had you know, everything all ready to go for last week, and then no dice. So this has been kind of a very long week for us here in Ottawa.
Yeah, no, we've been watching too, obviously, waiting for this. I kind of was expecting that they might try to pull this off on a Friday, just to kind of bury it a tiny bit into the weekend. Was there any buzz that that could happen, Paul?
We had our people ready to go on Friday afternoon, just in case they did try for that. But there wasn't really much rumor in my sources in the media that they were going to go in that direction, that they were going to wait until the last minute, which was today. Today is their deadline. So they were obliged to give an answer by today, and this is when they chose to come up with their answer.
We've heard from groups here in British Columbia. There was an era in this province, a decade or so ago, maybe a little bit longer, where protests were not all that uncommon. Some of them fairly serious and included violence in protecting our environment. We haven't seen that for a while, but there is some discussion that this may well happen again on this particular issue because it is so heavily opposed by so many groups. Nature Canada, what's your perspective on that, and what's your belief in how groups should be opposing this project?
Well, Nature Canada, we oppose violence of any kind. That goes without saying. We believe very much in being a part of the process. So, you know, a lot of groups kind of show up, give a press release at the start of, you know, pipeline hearings, and then give another press release at the conclusion. Nature Canada, we were really pleased to be one of only 2 coalitions of environmental organizations that were present. We hired a legal team from BC, from the University of Victoria, actually, to represent us throughout the pipeline hearings. And, you know, we were there. We were cross-examining witnesses. We were able to get key admissions from Enbridge's own experts. So we believe very much in participating in the process, trying to bring the science to bear on the decisions. And you know, if that doesn't work, as unfortunately it looks like it didn't today, then you know, we encourage Canadians to get involved, to write letters to their MPs, to join an environmental organization like my organization, or there are other organizations that are also doing great work on this file too.
All right, Paul Jorgenson joining us from Ottawa with Nature Canada. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, appreciate it.
All righty.